American dream, especially for our young people, which is why this big, beautiful bill does so much to bring American manufacturing back to the United States of America. These working families tax cuts, they don't just cut your taxes, though they certainly do. They reward companies for building and investing in the United States of America. Because isn't it nice to have an administration that is fighting for the businesses and the workers that are building right here at home rather than shipping our jobs off to Asia or Mexico? We fought for no taxes on overtime and no taxes on tips because we want you to keep more of your hard-earned money. We fought for an increase to the child tax credit because we want to make it easier for young families to bring new life into this world and to raise that new life in security and prosperity and comfort. The working families tax cut is not just a big 1,000-page bill. It is an important part, maybe the most important part, to restarting the American dream in this country. Wouldn't it be nice to have a president, and now we do, who builds in America rather than rewards companies for shipping jobs overseas? Wouldn't it be nice to have an administration that actually gives you more of your hard-earned money rather than taking more of it for hard-earned or for government bureaucrats? Wouldn't it be nice to have an administration that fights for your ability to keep more money in your pocket? Wouldn't it be nice to have an administration that punishes corporations that ship our jobs overseas, but rewards businesses for building right here in the great state of Michigan? That is what we promised to do, and that is what we're doing every single day. Now, I don't know if you saw the headlines this morning, if you turned on the TV this morning, but the president right now is participating in a great state visit to the United Kingdom, our closest ally, of course, going back to the very beginning of our country when we didn't always agree very early on. But pretty much since then, they've been very close friends of the United States, about 200 years, our most important ally in the world. And the president is over there, and somebody asked me, would you rather be in England celebrating the state visit? I said, no, I'd rather be right here in the great state of Michigan where people are building great products for the American people. So with all due respect to our great president and all due respect to the King of England, I am so proud to be right here where I am today, with all of you talking about all of the ways in which we can continue to build an America that works for normal Americans again. And that means a lot of things. Part of making this country work for you all is making sure you're safe in your communities and safe in your streets. And one of the proudest things the President of the United States has done in Washington, D.C. and in Memphis as of a couple of days ago is to send the National Guard to take back American streets. We deserve to be safe in our communities again, and that's what the President is making happen. And it's so funny, you go to these places and, you know, the TV cameras, very often the fake news media, all due respect to the fake news. We love them, even when we don't. They show up in these places and they put a microphone or a camera in front of somebody who they assume is a Democratic voter, and they say, what do you think about Donald Trump deploying these people to your city? And every single person says, it's a great idea. I just want to be safe, and we're glad the president is making that happen. So my one message to Governor Gretchen Whitmer here in the state of Michigan is, oh, come on. My one message to Gretchen Whitmer is, look, the city of Detroit, we know, has got some serious crime problems, and we know that it's the people in Detroit who suffer the most when crime is allowed to run rampant all over city streets. Gretchen, we are happy to send the National Guard to Detroit, Michigan. All you got to do is ask. We got to remember, the streets are safer when law enforcement is allowed to put the bad guys away. And just as we want to protect your job and we want to make sure you have a good wage when you work hard, we also want to make sure when you go home, you can enjoy your neighborhood and enjoy your community and safety. You know what else we want to do? We want to make sure that our young people stop dying of this terrible poison, this fentanyl and other drugs that are being brought in by these cartels. And I'll tell you a little story. I was talking to our great Secretary of Defense probably about a week and a half ago. And this was right after we lit up a narco-terrorist boat that was trying to bring drugs into the United States of America. And I gotta tell you, I am a child of the war on terrorism era. I served, just as Tom did, in our military. I deployed to Iraq as a United States Marine, a young enlisted United States Marine. I am proud to have a president who is sending our military to light up the cartels that threaten our people in our own backyard. That's where the military belongs, if they belong anywhere. So I was talking to I said Secretary of Defense, but our new Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. And I was talking to Secretary Hegseth, and you know what he said? He said, you know what, Mr. Vice President, we don't see any of these drug boats coming into our country. They've completely stopped. And I said, I know why. I would stop too. Hell, I wouldn't go fishing right now in that area of the world. But that is what a military that is dedicated to its purpose and a commander-in-chief that is dedicated to the national good can do. If we just have our actual government fighting for the interests of Americans and nobody else, we can make this country safer, we can protect your jobs, we can make sure you've got the best wages anywhere in the world, and we can stop this terrible poison from coming into our country. We just needed a president who was willing to fight for you, and now we've got one. So let me leave you with this final thought here. Look, I grew up in a community, you heard Secretary Chavez-DeRemer mention this, that I grew up in a community where the American dream seemed to be disappearing, where the jobs were getting shipped overseas, where the factories were closing down. I remember driving around my hometown, Middletown, Ohio, and we'd see some abandoned factory, and my grandfather would tell me what used to happen there, what good jobs used to happen there, what good wages used to provide for families there. And I remember thinking, why is it like this? Why have our leaders ignored us for so long? Why are factories closing instead of opening up? Why are good jobs going to China when American workers deserve good jobs right here at home? And the answer was bad leadership. Just as our leadership chose crime, they also chose to ship your jobs overseas. Just as they chose to send our young men and women to foreign wars all over the world, they refused to stop the cartels that were operating right here in our backyard. And I believe our sacred promise and our sacred duty is to make this country even better for the next generation than it was for the generation that came before. That is why we're doing the things that we're doing. But I want to tell you, I'm never going to forget where I came from. I am never going to forget that I was a little boy who was worried about why the jobs were disappearing. I'm never going to stop fighting for the auto workers to have good jobs right here at home. I'm never going to stop. I'm never going to stop, and neither is the President of the United States, from fighting for your public safety, for your good wages. We're going to fight for when you send $1 to Washington, D.C., that we spend it wisely. We're going to fight for you to have low taxes. If you're working hard, we're going to fight for you to keep as much of your hard-earned money as possible. Because I believe that the American dream belongs to American citizens, not to illegal aliens, not to drug cartels, and it doesn't belong to foreign workers. It belongs to workers right here in the state of Michigan. So I hope you remember, when you're voting in 2026, you have a choice between somebody who tried to fight for the illegal aliens and somebody who tried to fight against the drug cartels. You've got a choice between somebody who is trying to get good law enforcement officers to be able to do their job and those who demonized our cops and demonized our National Guardsmen. You've got a choice between politicians who shipped your jobs overseas and politicians who fought to keep good American jobs right here at home. Ladies and gentlemen, in November of 2026, we are going to have to make a choice. Let's make it for America, for our workers, and for our families. God bless you all, and thank you for having me.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. You were just watching Vice President J.D. Vance touting President Trump's achievements, saying that this is an administration who works for the American people instead of against it, and mentioning Charlie Kirk as well, saying that he would not be here without Kirk's help. All right. Top story today, a Texas State University student who mocked the death of Charlie Kirk is no longer at the university. The student's actions was caught on camera and even drew criticism from the state's governor. This video shows the student slapping his neck, then climbing the base of a statue and reenacting the moment Kirk was shot. The conservative speaker died after being shot in the neck last week during an event at Utah Valley University. Texas Governor Greg Abbott responded to the video on X, calling for the student to be expelled. During an event yesterday, the governor had this to say.
Whenever we see students who are celebrating an assassination, that goes beyond the bounds of what is humane, goes beyond the limits of what is humanity, and it must end. And we as a society, we as a state, must send a signal that behavior like that, celebrating an assassination, is wrong in a civil society.
Hours after Abbott's message yesterday, the president of the university issued a statement saying he is no longer a student at Texas State University. It's not clear whether the student was expelled or he voluntarily withdrew. The school's president says federal law prevents the school from commenting on matters of individual students' conduct. Eastern New Mexico University, Roswell, has fired a security guard for posting comments on social media mocking the death of conservative leader Charlie Kirk. His firing comes as some Republicans call on employers to fire workers celebrating the 31-year-old's assassination. Kirk was assassinated last Wednesday while speaking with students on campus at Utah Valley University. Fellow conservative activist Scott Presler identified the employee on X as Oswaldo Baquez Nava. Presler wrote, quote, "How can anyone that celebrates Charlie Kirk's assassination continue to serve as a security officer in charge of protecting lives?" Nava's Facebook post read, quote, "I woke up today and guess who didn't? Charlie Kirk, LOL." In a video statement, Eastern New Mexico University, Roswell, President Sean Powell commented on the firing. Powell said the safety of students, faculty, and staff was the university's top priority. Attorney General Pam Bondi clarifying in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination that speech won't be prosecuted unless it unlawfully incites violence. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that foreign nationals who made celebratory comments over Charlie Kirk's assassination will have their U.S. visas revoked. Joining us now to discuss all this is Kimberly Herman. She is the executive director at Southeastern Legal Foundation. So first of all, good afternoon to you, Kimberly. So I want to ask you, are all forms of speech, protected under the First Amendment, even if they may be deemed hateful or offensive?
No, not all forms of speech are protected under the First Amendment. What we're seeing in the last few days, and it's absolutely disgusting, but what we're seeing is more people calling to incite violence, right? When you are celebrating somebody's death, somebody who was publicly assassinated in front of the entire world, and you are celebrating that, you are essentially calling for more actions like that. We've actually seen calls like that. We see it from teachers. We see it from private employees. We see it from fire chiefs. We're seeing it all across this country. It's disgusting. And no, it crosses the line. It is not hate speech. It is then inciting violence, and it needs to be stopped.
Okay, so then I want to ask you then, what is the legal line exactly between speech that someone might deem hateful and speech that incites violence?
Yeah, so actually, hate speech has never formally been defined by the US Supreme Court. What they're actually going to look like is, are there calls for violence here, right? So saying that you don't agree with somebody, saying that you like something that happened is very different than saying a comment about how somebody should support somebody's death, how somebody should go out and incite this further violence. I mean, when you actually look at the motivations that are behind this assassination, you see pure hate. You see people saying, if you disagree with Charlie Kirk, if you don't support transgender people, then we should end lives, that we should stop that. That is so much more than just saying, I believe X, Y, or Z. There is a call for violence in this country. We are seeing it playing out in our blue cities, in our blue states. We're seeing it play out last week on our college campuses. It needs to stop. People need to start having civil discourse in this country. And I think that that's really what our Attorney General and our elected officials is getting at here. Let's start talking with one another, and let's stop spewing this hate and this inciting of violence.
Right, and that's what Pam Bondi was talking about as well earlier in the week, that they're going to go after people that incite violence with their speech. So what legal actions, I'm wondering, can the DOJ actually take against speech that incites violence?
So we have to look at this at different levels. We see private employers taking actions, and they can take every single action that they possibly want to against those private employees. The clip that you showed earlier about the student in Texas, and we see students all across this country. When you're reenacting an assassination, when you're reenacting the death of a father, of an American who fought for this country day in and day out, that is so much more than making a political commentary. You are then essentially showing people what they should be doing and going out there. And so I think that, on college campuses, action should be taken against these students, and it will be, as we're seeing state governments. We're seeing K through 12 teachers that are being removed from the classroom and started disciplinary procedures. And so, we need to be vigilant, as Americans. We need to be pointing this out. And we, quite frankly, need to just start, like I said, talking to our neighbors. We can disagree, and that is fine. But celebrating and promoting and inciting violence has absolutely no place in America, especially on a day like today when we need to be celebrating our Constitution, celebrating our First Amendment here on Constitution Day. Let's all do that and honor Charlie's memory by going out and engaging in civil discourse with our neighbors.
Right, that is absolutely correct. Is there a threshold, I'm wondering, that needs to be met before the U.S. can open a case on the grounds of incitement for violence? And I'm asking this in the context of an example a few days ago where a British comedian was arrested because of a post online that said along the lines that if you're a trans-identified male in a female space only, he was tweeting about this, I believe, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him. I think he said that. Is that enough for authorities to take action against you here in the U.S.?
The inciting of violence could possibly be enough, right? The beginning part of that, absolutely not. We all can state our views, and quite frankly, a man has absolutely no place in a woman's, restroom, and a woman there may have absolutely every right to defend herself physically if she is being attacked. And so, yes, where is that threshold? The courts are going to start to tell us. Again, as I mentioned, the Supreme Court has not definitively weighed in on some of these issues. And quite frankly, it's because this is disgusting behavior. This is not something that has ever happened in our country in this way. God willing, it will never, ever happen again. But if people would just stop and think about what they're saying and realize they are talking about a father, they are talking about a husband, they are talking about a son. Say what you want about policies. Say what you want about his speech, but stop mimicking his death, stop mocking his death, and stop promoting other people from going out there and acting the same way, because that blood will be on their hands then.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. As well, President Trump advisor Stephen Miller recently, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, the path forward is not to mimic the ACLU of the mid-90s. He's saying this. He's saying it's necessary to take all rational steps to save Western civilization. What does he mean by that when he says that?
I'm not exactly sure what Stephen Miller meant by that and what was in his head, but I can tell you that the way that I would interpret that is that we need to be standing by our Constitution. We are a country of rule of law. We have a First Amendment. We all need to be using it. We need to be using it respectfully. And we're seeing this in other areas too, right? We saw Secretary Rubio come out and make comments about how, those applying for visas, if they're calling for additional violence against this country, if they're calling for additional violence against any individuals, that they will not get their visa. And he has every right to do that. If they are creating a public threat, if they are supporting violence, if they are supporting terrorism against this country, then they should not be in this country. This is where you seek the American dream. And if you're not actually believing in the great experiment that is America and believing in American ideas, you have no business being in this country. And I think that's what Stephen Miller was probably really getting at in those comments.
Okay, I'm glad as well you brought up the visa thing. So Secretary of State Marco Rubio is talking about potentially revoking visas for foreigners. And this is in the context of speech. So I want to ask you, don't legal visa holders in the U.S. have First Amendment protections as well?
They do have First Amendment protections. There are additional statutory regulations and statutory requirements, right? So Congress passes laws, and in order to get and keep those visas, those particular requirements under those laws have to be met. And if you are posing a public threat to this country, if you are inciting violence, if you are potentially a terroristic threat to this country, then those are reasons why your visa could be revoked. And so, yes, you have First Amendment rights, but there are also additional requirements that have to be met to get and to keep those visas. It's not just a blank check to go do whatever you want in this country. You still have to follow our laws and our Constitution.
Okay, just quickly, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Maybe just one more question. How much authority does the executive branch have to revoke visas based on speech that's offensive, but not a direct threat? Do courts need to get involved in this process?
So there is a big legal distinction between offensive speech and threats, right? We're not talking about if somebody's feelings are hurt here. That's really what you're talking about when we say some speech is offensive. Somebody's feelings are hurt. It's a subjective viewpoint. We're talking here about objective public threats. And so our lawsuit's going to be brought. I have no doubt that we will see a slew of lawsuits from these private employees, from students, from people that are, being removed from their place of employment in response to this. And the courts are going to have to answer those hard questions. I have no doubt that those could work their way all up to the U.S. Supreme Court. That's what our courts are for. They're there to help us interpret and understand our laws. And so if there is a disagreement on what that means, then by all means, let's hash it out in the court of law. But again, we are a country that is rule of law. We will stand by the Constitution. And if that's what the Supreme Court says, then we will all follow that.
Okay, Kimberly, we appreciate your comments today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Former President Barack Obama speaking on Charlie Kirk's assassination for the first time. Here's what he said during an event in Pennsylvania yesterday.
Regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, what happened to Charlie Kirk was horrific and a tragedy. What happened, as you mentioned, to the state legislators in Minnesota, that is horrific. It is a tragedy. And there are no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Obama said he didn't know Kirk, but was generally aware of some of his ideas. While he disagrees with Kirk's beliefs, he mourns for Kirk and his family. The former president was speaking at an event for the Jefferson Educational Society, a nonprofit organization based in Erie, Pennsylvania. Obama spoke at length about concerns over escalating political violence in recent years, saying the country is at an inflection point. The Democrat also praised Republican Utah Governor Spencer Cox for his response to the assassination, saying he was very impressed with the governor's approach. Several Democrats joined House Republicans to address crime in Washington, D.C. Plus, two lawmakers are asking the Treasury to probe a China-based billionaire they say is sowing political discord in America on behalf of the Chinese regime. We have that story and more when we come back.
Divinely inspired traditional oil painting inspires compassion. Artwork created in truth and beauty illuminates a path to goodness. Rediscover traditional art, revive classical culture. We warmly invite oil painters from around the world to participate in the 7th NTD International Figure Painting Competition, a celebration of classical realism. Please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritang omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritang green vegetable omega-3, greener, healthier, and more effective. Visit puritang.com to learn more.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains unmoved.
She's in quite a perilous situation, but she's completely strong and serene, and she's actually meditating. It was very, very well liked because no matter what culture or what sort of walk of life you're from, I think people, they see it and they immediately understand what that energy, what that message is, and they're drawn to it because everybody kind of needs a little bit of that in their own life, of, you know, the steadfast calmness and something to hold on to. It's definitely an inner peace in the midst of something very chaotic, and for a lot of people right now, the whole world is very, very chaotic. So I guess that's another reason why so many people are very drawn to this.
FBI Director Kash Patel recapping what his department has done in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination. We have a clip from his oversight hearing before the House Judiciary Committee today. Take a look.
Charlie Kirk was unfortunately assassinated on September 10th. We immediately, the next day, released images early in the day in local time in Utah to start the public partnership in our manhunt for the assassin and culprits. At approximately 5 p.m. local time, I arrived on the ground and walked the crime scene myself. And we flew multiple FBI assets in and out to process DNA simultaneously while bringing in evidence response technicians, hostage rescue teams, and other experts to assist state and local law enforcement with their investigation. At 8 p.m. local on September 11th, the FBI collected and populated and promulgated at a press conference a video of the suspect on the grounds. We also released enhanced images. Due to that release that I directed and ordered, the suspect involved was apprehended and in custody at 10 p.m. local time. That's less than 2 hours after we did the video release and the photo release.
Lawmakers questioned Patel on the Charlie Kirk assassination. January 6th, his firings within the FBI, his loyalty to President Trump, the Epstein files, and more. This is the FBI director's second day of testimony on Capitol Hill after appearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday. Congressman Jerry Nadler questioned Patel on the prevalence of political violence in America. Listen.
Director Patel, do you agree that there is political violence from both the left and the right?
There's too much political
Do you
violence.
agree, yes or no, that there's violence?
There is too much political violence based on ideologies from either side.
From either side, okay.
The FBI director highlighted what his bureau has done to fight crime under the Trump administration. He says the FBI has arrested more than 23,000 violent criminals, which is twice as many a year ago to date compared to last year. It took over 6,000 firearms off the streets, identified and found 4,700 child victims, and arrested 1,500 child predators, all at higher rates year to date compared to last year. Patel says the FBI also captured 4 of the top 10 most wanted fugitives in the world in 7 months, as many as during the entirety of the Biden administration. House lawmakers passed the first of several bills to address crime in Washington, D.C. Republicans say the bills could be used as a blueprint to address crime in other cities and states. NTD congressional correspondent Melina Weisskopf has more about the bills.
2 crime-related bills passed the House and are now headed to the Senate for a vote. They aim to overturn Washington, D.C.'s laws addressing youth offenders. The first one aims to lower the age from 16 to 14, in which minors can be charged as adults for certain felonies, like murder. The second one, called the D.C. Crimes Act, aims to charge young adults exactly as adults, redefining the term youth offender from age 24 to age 18. It also aims to provide more transparency into how many young people here in D.C. are actually committing crimes. They're creating a public website to keep track of it. Here's the bill's sponsor, Congressman Byron Donalds.
District officials have actively facilitated dysfunction and chaos through their progressive soft-on-crime policies. Instead of addressing the clear epidemic of youth crime in the city, the D.C. City Council increased the age of youth offenders to individuals 24 years old and younger, meaning fully grown legal adults in the District of Columbia can receive sentences meant for children.
His bill got the support of 30 Democrats, though most Democrats were opposed, saying that bills like this undermines D.C.'s autonomy. Now we'll have to see if that same level of Democrat support makes its way over to the Senate so that these bills actually have a shot at becoming law. In other news, lawmakers from the House Oversight Committee are now asking the Treasury Department to probe a China-based billionaire by the name of Neville Roy Singham. These lawmakers say that he's the main backer behind a Marxist group, Party for Socialism and Liberation, and that he's also played a key role in organizing nationwide protests, including the riots in Los Angeles. This is part of a broader investigation. The chairman of the Oversight Committee, James Comer, is looking into the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to sow discord among Americans. Lawmakers say that Singham is acting on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party to magnify internal disputes. So now they're asking the Treasury Department to formally open an investigation into Singham after he previously ignored the committee's requests. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Happening now, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is holding a news conference. Let's take a look.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. While the unemployment rate remains low, it has edged up. Job gains have slowed, and downside risks to employment have risen. At the same time, inflation has risen recently and remains somewhat elevated. In support of our goals, and in light of the shift in the balance of risks, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to lower our policy interest rate by 0.25 percentage point. We also decided to continue to reduce our securities holdings. I'll have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that growth of economic activity has moderated. GDP rose at a pace of around 1.5% in the first half of the year, down from 2.5% last year. The moderation in growth largely reflects a slowdown in consumer spending. In contrast, business investment in equipment and intangibles has picked up from last year's pace. Activity in the housing sector remains weak. In our summary of economic projections, the median participant projects GDP to rise 1.6% this year and 1.8% next year, a touch stronger than projected in June. In the labor market, the unemployment rate edged up to 4.3% in August, but remains little changed over the past year at a relatively low level. Payroll job gains have slowed significantly to a pace of just 29,000 per month over the past 3 months. A good part of the slowing likely reflects a decline in the growth of the labor force due to lower immigration and lower labor force participation. Even so, labor demand has softened, and the recent pace of job creation appears to be running below the break-even rate needed to hold the unemployment rate constant. In addition, wage growth has continued to moderate while still outpacing inflation. Overall, the marked slowing in both the supply of and demand for workers is unusual. In this less dynamic and somewhat softer labor market, the downside risks to employment appear to have risen. In our SEP, the median projection for the unemployment rate is 4.5% at the end of this year and edges down thereafter. Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.7% over the 12 months ending in August, and that, excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.9%. These readings are higher than earlier in the year as inflation for goods has picked up. In contrast, disinflation appears to be continuing for services. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have moved up, on balance, over the course of this year on news about tariffs, as reflected in both market and survey-based measures. Beyond the next year or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 3.0% this year and falls to 2.6% in 2026 and to 2.1% in 2027. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to lower the target range for the federal funds rate by a quarter percentage point to 4 to 4.25%, and to continue reducing the size of our balance sheet. Changes to government policies continue to evolve, and their effects on the economy remain uncertain. Higher tariffs have begun to push up prices in some categories of goods, but their overall effects on economic activity and inflation remain to be seen. A reasonable base case is that the effects on inflation will be relatively short-lived, a one-time shift in the price level. But it is also possible that the inflationary effects could instead be more persistent, and that is a risk to be assessed and managed. Our obligation is to ensure that a one-time increase in the price level does not become an ongoing inflation problem. In the near term, risks to inflation are tilted to the upside and risks to employment to the downside, a challenging situation. When our goals are in tension like this, our framework calls for us to balance both sides of our dual mandate. With downside risks to employment having increased, the balance of risks has shifted. Accordingly, we judged it appropriate at this meeting to take another step toward a more neutral policy stance. With today's decision, we remain well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments. We will continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. In our SEP, FOMC participants wrote down their individual assessments.
You're just watching now Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell announcing a 25.25% cut to the Fed funds rate. And joining us now to discuss is Daniel Lacalle. He's the chief economist at Tressis, an international financial analyst and author of Freedom or Equality. We're also joined by Dave Herbert, research fellow at American Institute for Economic Research. So we got the number today. Daniel, let me start with you. From what you heard of Powell, what do you think the Fed is balancing right now? What is his priorities?
I don't understand anything that he's saying. He is completely abandoning the mandate. The Fed is, on the one hand, acknowledging the atrocious revision of jobs that was seen for 2023 and 2024. The U.S. has been in a private sector recession since 2023 because of the wrong policies of the Fed. And now the only thing that they do is cut 25 basis points by making some kind of strange narrative about tariffs that has been completely denied by reality. There is an absolutely zero effect on import prices of tariffs. We have seen it in the data of August. We have also seen in the PCE, in the PPI, in the CPI, all of the measures of inflation. There is absolutely no impact of tariffs on inflation, and yet acknowledging that they are above the neutral level and understanding, according to the Federal Reserve of Minneapolis, that every time that they step for 6 months above the neutral level, they are destroying jobs in small and medium enterprises that account for 90% of job creation in the United States. They have only cut by 25 basis points. And this is what makes no sense, because they say that they're data dependent, but that they're not data dependent. They say that they're going to wait, but they don't need to wait. I don't understand anything of this Fed. Really. I mean, they should be data dependent. If they are data dependent and they have the tools and something happens in the future, do it in the future. But it seems like they are just, for some strange reason, stubbornly waiting for their models to work, which they have not for the past 4 years.
Okay, Dave, from what you heard, do you agree? I believe Powell is saying there's upside risk to inflation and downside risk to the economy or the labor market. Your overall reactions right now, Dave?
So that's always the trade-off that the Federal Reserve is going to face is, are these things going to be inflationary in the sense that when we lower rates, we might see upticks in inflation, or will we actually want to raise rates and try to lower inflation and bring things back down? So what I saw to Jerome Powell was a very measured approach. To him, he expects that the job market is going to be, or perhaps is, quite weaker than it already is right now, and that he's going to try to head this off and give sort of a test case to see if a 25 basis point reduction leads to higher inflation, in which case, if it does, he might revisit his decision to lower the rate in the future. What's really interesting, though, is that the president has been touting this as a remarkably strong economy. Now, you don't typically lower rates in a strong economy. That's a time actually to raise them and get inflation under control. So the fact that we're seeing Steve Myron, especially, pointing to the need for a massive reduction in rate cuts, 0.5, but even on the dot plot down to about a 3% decrease, that tells me that there's something in the administration that suggests that the economy might actually be weaker overall than they might be letting on, which would be a cause for lowering interest rates.
Okay, Daniel, can you comment on the labor market situation? Because Powell, I heard earlier, and you as well, you heard him saying that the numbers are at a point where perhaps unemployment rate could go up. Can you comment on that?
Well, let's start by understanding what is really going on in the labor market. Private sector jobs are actually increasing, and that is a positive. The economy is doing relatively well. But what the Fed cannot do is, just because they fear that inflation may rise due to some neoclassical expectation of inflation instead of looking at monetary aggregates, what they cannot do is hurt job creation now and in the future just in case. This is what doesn't make any sense. I mean, I, as a libertarian, I believe that the Fed should not set rates, but starting from the point that they should be at a neutral level, what we need to understand is that the economy growing and the labor market being relatively resilient are not reasons to keep elevated rates, because what drives inflation is not the rates. What drives inflation is the fact that the Fed increased dramatically money supply, which led to an enormous level of increase in government spending, which accelerated money velocity and therefore created this enormous mess. So bringing down rates by 25 basis points is not going to create an inflationary burst. What creates an inflationary burst is massive increase in government spending. Government spending is actually under control. Deficit spending is coming slightly down. All those things are under control. So the economy is in a relatively good shape, but it could be much better. That is the point. The point is that the Fed is not there to play with their expectations of what should be inflation according to failed models that have failed in 21, 22, 23, and 24. What they should be doing is being data dependent. If they are data dependent, they should read their own beige book, which in March and April announced that there was a very significant weakening of the labor market. And if they read their own beige book, they also announce, and they saw, and it's in the data, that there's no inflationary pressure from tariffs. So the administration is right. They should cut rates, but not because the economy is doing badly, but because there is no inflationary pressure. And second, because the impact on job creation for small and medium enterprises is enormous. Think about this. 100 basis points difference for small and medium enterprises in rates means 1 million jobs less created every year. That, according to the Federal Reserve of Minneapolis and their models, in my numbers, it's a lot worse. But think about this for a second. A lot of small and medium enterprises in America are not getting any credit. It's not a question of price. It's a question that they don't get any credit because on the one hand, the Fed is keeping the cost of borrowing way too high. And at the same time, the yield of the Treasury is at 4%. Therefore, banks are hoarding treasuries and not lending to small and medium enterprises. This is the problem. So they are creating a problem trying to make their models work, and their models have never worked.
Okay, Dave, can I get a response from you to what Daniel is saying, and tell us, how do you feel about the size of the cut that we got today?
So I think the size of the cut is appropriate given everything that we're seeing. Frankly, I'm not sure where the lack of information about inflation is coming from. All the reports we're seeing and all the reports that we're seeing out of survey data, especially from the American consumer, is indicating that there is modest inflation in the goods market. Now, that is pushing prices up. We've got plenty of data sources suggesting that these prices are being felt by consumers who are purchasing tariffed goods. So it's really just not clear to me where this is coming from, where the idea that there is no inflation. That's just patently absurd.
No, sorry.
And it
no
is
inflationary
right
pressure
from
from
Federal
tariffs.
Reserve lowering its interest rate is a test case to see if inflation ticks up. So the rate is the correct number to be moving right now.
Okay, Daniel, your response.
No, sorry, I wanted to clarify. I did not say that there is no inflation. Obviously, there is inflation. But there is no inflationary pressure from tariffs, which is the reason why the Fed is keeping rates at this level, 100 basis points above the neutral level. There is inflation, obviously, and we know it, but if monthly inflation is exactly the same as it was in September, October, and August of 2024, then the impact of tariffs is zero. We have seen it in import prices. Import price increase for U.S. is 0% year to date, 0.9% in the, if you look at the figures excluding energy, so virtually none, compared with the inflationary pressures that we saw. That is the key element. Do I want deflation? I'm obviously all up for the Fed stopping their enormous level of liquidity injections and maintaining what he just said, what Powell just said. Because let's remember that the inflationary pressures that exist today and in 2024 come from the fact that the Federal Reserve decided to panic in 2023 and delayed and postponed the process of reducing the balance sheet, which should have been reduced by now by another $1 trillion, and they have done it much, much lower. That means that they have prioritized liquidity injections to keep the federal government budget deficit bubble afloat, while at the same time hurting families and small and medium enterprises. What they should do is to shift the policy. I agree with my esteemed colleague. There are inflationary pressures, but they're not coming from tariffs. That is a false narrative. That is, they're coming from the fact that obviously we all know inflation is accumulative, and if inflation is still showing the effect of the increase in both money and supply and money velocity from 2021 to 2024.
Okay, Dave, can you clarify for us your view on tariffs with regards to its impact on prices?
Sure. So my colleague here is potentially correct. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. However, I will submit to you that the cost of manufacturing, because of tariffs, has increased dramatically in this country. My evidence for this is Ford, GM, and Chrysler, now Stellantis, all paying hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff costs that have precluded them from hiring tens of thousands of new employees. We're also seeing manufacturing places shut down left, right, and center across the entire nation, and the Federal Reserve Board's business outlook has turned decidedly negative since the tariffs. Now, look, we can debate whether or not this meets the definition of inflation, but the simple fact of the matter is that manufacturing has gotten more expensive in this country, and that is robbing us of jobs. Insofar as the Fed is trying to stave off that, cutting the rate like this is a smart move.
Okay, Daniel, do you agree that tariffs is putting a upward pressure on manufacturing? Manufacturing.
Okay, this is one of the things that we have to discuss all the time. We go back to a debate about individual prices, not aggregate prices. Inflation is the increase in aggregate prices coming from the reduction in the purchasing power of the currency. The reduction in the purchasing power of the currency of the United States is absolutely and unequivocally lower than in the rate of change of the last 3 years. In any case, the fact that some manufacturers are unable to get those tariffs under control, that doesn't mean that those tariffs are going to the final price, as showed by the fact that import prices in America, the index of import prices, is up year on year 0%. Zero, nothing, nada, including energy and excluding energy. So the point of going to individual prices, yes, there may be, I don't know if the price of this watch is going up because of tariffs, but that is not inflation. Inflation is aggregate prices, and the rate of change in aggregate prices, July, August, June, May, April, is showing that there is no inflationary pressure from tariffs. There is inflation. Obviously, there is inflation. The Fed is in itself telling you that their mandate is that prices have to rise every year by at least 2%. So, of course, there is inflation, but the inflationary pressure from tariffs is non-existent. Is there one or two companies that are not adapting to those tariffs? Maybe. They may as well. By the way, a very interesting point that my esteemed colleague mentioned, if those companies are unable to adapt to the tariffs, and that is precluding them from hiring tens of thousands of jobs, they're only cutting rates by 25 basis points, then they're not fulfilling their mandate. Then they're doing exactly the opposite. They are hurting them in the inflationary pressures, and they're hurting them in the rate. You see, the problem of the tariff narrative that I hear so many times, and there are many reasons to discuss whether tariffs are good or bad. I'm not saying that, but not the inflationary ones. The problem is that if you really believe that tariffs are a problem, they should be cutting rates in order to allow those jobs to be kept alive. Because if not, you're passing two costs to those few companies that cannot absorb the tariffs. But the reality of what we have seen in exports, in the exporting companies, imports in the United States are up, and the import price is zero. That means that the United States is receiving more goods from abroad and is getting no impact in those prices from the tariffs. Now, you can say anything you want about the impact on individual prices, but inflation is aggregate prices.
Okay, Dave, I started with Daniel, so you get the final word here. Any thoughts you'd like to add?
Philosophically, my colleague and I are in total agreement here. I would point out one quick correction. That import price index that he keeps alluding to being flat, that's before tariffs in the price index. Tariffs are not included there. So if that index is indeed flat, that means the pass-through rate to the American people is near 100%. That's going to drive up costs of manufacturing. That's going to drive up costs for you and I and everyone else.
Okay, well, I think we can leave it there for today. Thank you, Daniel and Dave, you both for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
If you receive money from the federal government, you've got only a couple of weeks left to make sure you can get it digitally. The Treasury Department plans to stop issuing paper checks for most payments on September 30th. That includes to Social Security beneficiaries. It's part of the Trump administration's effort to fully monetize federal benefits payments, save money, and fight financial fraud. More than 500,000 Social Security recipients, less than 1%, need to choose another way to receive their Social Security benefits. That can be either direct deposit or through a prepaid debit card, known as Direct Express. If you still need to receive a paper check, you can request a waiver. Some exceptions will be made, such as if you're 90 or older, have a mental impairment, or live in too remote of a location. You can apply for a waiver at the website godirect.gov. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, videos of people cheering on his death are inundating social media. How are Americans reacting to the celebration of political violence? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Vice President J.D. Vance was citing this statistic from YouGov saying that 26% of young liberals today believe that political violence is somewhat justified, and whereas 7% of young conservatives say the same. What are your thoughts on that number?
It doesn't surprise me at all. We're from Seattle. It's very liberal out there. And we get a lot of that sort of rhetoric out there.
I can't believe in the country we're at today that if you speak your mind, they want to shut you up. It's funny that the left and the party of tolerance and et cetera just wants to shut conservative voices down, and it's insane to me.
There are strong forces that are indoctrinating the young people today, and I think the government through Donald Trump, they'll come to find out where the money's coming from and maybe shut some of those places down. You know, First Amendment gives people broad latitude to speak their mind and speak their truth, but I mean, not to do the things that they do.
What would you guys say to those who are right now celebrating Charlie's passing? What would you say to them?
What's their reason? What's the reason for doing that? I want somebody to explain that to me because I don't understand, and I think most of the country doesn't understand, or most of the world.
First reaction is like, yeah, I want to do something stupid and be violent, but that's not what Charlie would have been all about. That wasn't what he's about.
To the people that are celebrating it is sickening, and I don't really think they even understand the gravity of what they're doing. He was 2 kids' dads, and he was a husband, and you know, I'm sure he's got parents that are around.
We stand here at the Lincoln Memorial. He paid the ultimate price for his beliefs and what he did to shape our nation, and I think what's happened with Charlie Kirk, although he wasn't a political figure, he was very much a figure in the national eye, and that same type of spirit of retaking our freedom and our liberties, I think, is playing out around the country.
The Tucker Carlson Network has raised over $5 million for Charlie Kirk's family. That's as Americans across the country continue donating money following Kirk's assassination. Neil Patel announced on X that the network has reached the $5 million mark. His X bio says, the co-founder and CEO of the Tucker Carlson Network. He posted that over 44,000 people donated, including celebrities such as Kid Rock. Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica, will now have to raise their 2 children on her own. Patel says the goal of the fundraiser is to make sure she at least doesn't have to worry about finances. Fox News reports that almost $3 million have also been collected on the Give, Send, Go platform, and GoFundMe told the outlet that multiple fundraisers have also been started on its website. President Trump and First Lady Melania will attend the state banquet in Windsor Castle as guests of honor. We have that and more after the break.
sound that saved a wretch like me.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming. Please call or go online now. With your gift of $19 a month, we'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org.
With almost 4 decades in the spotlight, Cindy Crawford has never lost her stunning glow. With her gorgeous, age-defying skin, US Weekly says whatever she's doing, it's clearly working. How does her skin still look firm, smooth, and youthful at 58? It's meaningful beauty. And now, with new advanced formulas, it's better than ever, delivering our age-defying ingredients even deeper into the skin to fight wrinkles where they begin. Just wait until you see the difference meaningful beauty can make for you.
Instant hydration, instant plumping. My skin looks amazing. What I'm most proud of is over 5 million women have trusted Meaningful Beauty, and they're getting great results, and I get that feedback from them in airports, supermarkets, walking down the street, and I love it.
And today, we are celebrating 20 years of Meaningful Beauty with a brand new offer you don't want to miss. You can get the entire advanced Meaningful Beauty system with all 5 age-defying super treatments. And when you order today, you'll receive our Targeted Treatment Duo, a $128 value free. Introducing the wrinkle smoothing capsules to target crow's feet, forehead lines, and lines around your mouth. Plus, you'll also get the new